Did you know that 11 wasn't supposed to survive past the first season of Stranger Things? We dug up some interesting facts that could have completely changed the show everyone is devouring on Netflix. Wait until you see what the original Demogorgon looked like. We'll get to that in a minute. For now, let's start with the location of the story. The Montauk Project. Many fans had no idea that Stranger Things was originally set in Montauk, New York. That's right. In 2015, Netflix announced that the show was set to take place in 1980 in Montauk, Long Island's most eastern point. Montauk is known for its wineries and beach homes, so that already sets it apart from Hawkins, Indiana, which is where the show is actually set. Can you imagine Will's mom hanging those Christmas lights in a beach house overlooking the water? The Montauk location was inspired by secret government experiments that took place in Camp Hero, a state park located on Montauk Point from the 1960s to the 1980s. They were called the Montauk Project. The story about 11 and the Demogorgon coming into contact and opening a portal to the Upside Down originates from an incident in the Montauk Project. Conspiracy theorists say that there is an incident in 1983 that ended these secret experiments. Apparently, the U.S. military had been conducting these experiments on children like 11 for 40 years. The Duffer brothers said that while they loved the idea of setting Stranger Things in a coastal town, they had to choose a different location due to logistical production reasons. They set it in Indiana with an Anywhere USA feel to it. The name of the show. So now we know that the show is said to be based on events that may or may not have happened in Montauk, New York. Presumably for this reason, the original title of the show was Montauk. Can you imagine those red neon letters during the title sequence reading Montauk instead of Stranger Things? Sources say they weren't too keen on changing the name. In fact, they called it Montauk right up until the air date. So how did they arrive at Stranger Things? Apparently, it was the only other name the creators could stomach. The creative staff at Netflix made a list of alternative titles before they decided on Stranger Things. But Matt Duffer hated all the names on that list. He said that he hopes the list of alternate titles never ever comes out on the internet. He told everyone that if they leak the list, he will hurt them. Casting. In the beginning, there was a question of whether to hire kid actors who had some experience or just do an open call to all kids, regardless of their acting experience. They ultimately decided to stick with kids who had acting chops and had performed professionally before. Even with that filter on the casting process, they saw over 2,000 kids internationally for the major kids roles.
Open.
Several of the actors had been on Broadway before, namely Gaten Matarazzo, who had performed in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and Les Miserables. We found a video of him singing Bring Him Home from Les Miserables, and he really does have a gorgeous singing voice. Millie Bobby Brown was on a BBC miniseries called Intruders. Finn Wolfhard had also been in a TV show called Supernatural. It's hard to imagine what Stranger Things would have been like with less experienced actors, particularly for the role of 11. That role would have been hard to pull off for a newbie. Casting director Carmen Cuba said that they always knew it was ambitious to expect that they would find kids that were going to be able to pull these roles off. It seems they found the perfect cast for the show. 11's escape. In early drafts of the Stranger Things pilot, 11 unleashed her powers very early in the story. She used her telekinetic powers to free herself from the lab, and it was intense. But instead, the Duffer brothers decided to tease it out for a bit and surprise audiences with how powerful 11 actually is. So they left the escape up to the viewer's imagination. Matt Duffer explained that the idea was to slowly reveal the extent of 11's powers over the season. He said in the original script they sold to Netflix, 11 was hunted by agents, and she exploded a door right off its hinges. And this was all in the first episode. As soon as they started mapping out the season, realizing they had 8 hours to fill, they scaled it back a bit. Matt said they built an entire backstory for 11 and then dropped those puzzle pieces in throughout the first season. Ross added that when they finally did reveal 11's full powers, it had more impact. They started with very small things and built it up through the episodes. So by episode 6, you know a lot about her. Steve Harrington. In the beginning of season 1, everyone hated Steve Harrington. He seems totally indifferent to the fact that Barb has gone missing. He tries to convince Nancy to lie about the party in the interest of protecting himself. Then he and his friends make fun of Nancy after he sees her hanging out with Jonathan. To top it all off, he broke Jonathan's camera. Okay, Jonathan kind of deserved it, but still, we all agreed Nancy was way too good for Steve. But he totally redeems himself by the end of the season. He apologizes to Nancy and helps them go after the Demogorgon. He also buys Jonathan a new camera, which was pretty sweet for a bad boy with awesome hair. He could have gone the way Billy did in the series, but he turned a major corner. Billy's presence really highlighted Steve's growth in the show. The Duffer Brothers shared that Joe Keery, the actor who plays Steve, had a lot to do with the character development.
This'll do just fine. Good call, dude.
But can you imagine what the show would have been like if Steve never evolved from the douchey high school cool guy? The story would have been way different. 11 wasn't supposed to survive. In October 2018, the companion book Stranger Things, Worlds Turned Upside Down was released, revealing insider facts about the show. The Duffer Brothers shared that their original story plan for the series was quite a bit different than the show we all know. According to Ross Duffer, 11 wasn't supposed to survive the first season. Ross said 11 was going to sacrifice herself to save everyone from the Demogorgon. Once they realized the show was getting picked up for more than one season, they decided to leave things more up in the air. Ross said that deep down they knew the show just wouldn't be the same without 11, and they knew how special Millie was. Everyone agreed that 11's presence was crucial going forward with the series. So what would have happened if 11 didn't make it in season 1? Can you imagine Stranger Things without this iconic character? Also, apparently, Sean Astin's character, Bob Newby, was supposed to meet his demise a lot sooner in the series. The Duffer Brothers said that Sean was so likable, they felt they had to push his goodbye to a few more episodes.
Hey, look, a green one.
They said they kept wanting him to be alive. The show that almost wasn't. After directing a low-budget, straight-to-video horror film that took 4 years to release, the Duffer Brothers started pitching their idea for Stranger Things to studios. When they did, the show was rejected by over 15 networks. Studios didn't like the fact that it's a science fiction and horror show that focuses on a bunch of kids as the main characters. Studio executives told the Duffer Brothers to either make the tone of the show more kid-friendly or shift focus to an adult character like Sheriff Hopper.
Oh, Jesus.
They liked the idea of Hopper, played by David Harbour, investigating paranormal activity around town. Matt and Ross Duffer refused, insisting that doing what they suggested would take away everything interesting about the show. They were ready to give up on Stranger Things right before Netflix got wind of the show's premise and picked it up. They signed the Duffers to write, direct, and produce the show, proving that it can pay off to invest in unknown talent. Stranger Things across the decades. The Stranger Things that we all know and love was almost completely different. After the first season came out, fans wondered if the show would continue the storyline with the same characters, location, and time frame. Or was it possible that the show's creators would follow in the veins of the shows like American Horror Story, Fargo, or American Crime Story? The premise with these shows is that they follow a different set of unrelated stories and characters each season. That would mean that our journey with 11, Dustin, Will, Mike, and Lucas would have come to an end after season 1. But the Duffer Brothers liked the idea of making a sort of 8-hour movie. They wanted to follow the storyline through. However, they did consider setting each new season in a different decade. So since season 1 was set in the 1980s, season 2 would have been set in the 1990s. Then season 3, 4, and 5 would have represented the 2000s, 2010s, and finally 2020s. But they fell in love with the world they created and wanted to continue on the journey with these kids. We're sure we speak for everyone when we say, good call. CGI. The Duffer Brothers are huge fans of movies from the 80s. They loved movies like E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Jaws, and Star Wars. So they wanted to honor those genres by using as little CGI as possible. The Duffers believed that computer-generated special effects just didn't have the same effect as the practical effects of these big blockbuster movies from the 80s. They pointed to the fact that J.J. Abrams used real props in Star Wars The Force Awakens, and it worked really well. Their intent was to blend real with CGI effects. Their goal was to use 20% CGI and 80% practical effects, but with the short shooting schedule and the demands of the story, they weren't able to pull off that ratio. They eventually settled on about 50% CGI effects for the final product. It's hard to make a Demogorgon stretch through the wall given the time constraints. However, the production designer did spend a lot of time hunting down authentic props online from eBay. They found things like trapper keepers and toys from the 80s that gave the show the same feel as those classic films from the time period. Justice for Barb. If fans had it their way, Barb would have met with a different fate on the show. Even the creators were pretty bummed when they had to sacrifice Barb to move the story along. Typically in horror movies, the rebellious teenagers who are engaging in questionable acts are the first to go. But while Nancy was upstairs making even more bad decisions, our innocent Barb was being snagged by the Demogorgon. It goes against everything the audience was expecting, which is the good girls and guys are spared and the bad kids are sacrificed to the monsters. The Duffer Brothers admitted that the creative team would often shake their heads in remorse, saying, "Poor Barb." Fans agreed and even started a campaign with the hashtag Justice for Barb. Fans like Brent Buffington posted that he went for a late-night pool swim, but it didn't feel right. He wrote it was still too soon and that he can't believe we lost her so abruptly, followed by the hashtag Justice for Barb. We feel you, Brent. Barb was like the best friend we all wish we had in high school. The original Demogorgon. The mythology of the Demogorgon goes back centuries, but in the show, the kids first mention the Demogorgon during a game of Dungeons and Dragons. While the creature goes back hundreds of years, the D&D version of the demonic being is an 18-foot-tall monster with a scaly reptile body, tentacles for arms, and 2 huge baboon heads. It was called the Prince of Demons, and even in the game, it was the stuff of nightmares. But the creators of the show deviated from the D&D version of this monster. Instead of 2 giant baboon heads, they went with a faceless petal head that folds in and opens up, revealing a bunch of little terrifying teeth.
How do you know if it's not just a lizard?
Because his face opened up and he ate my cat.
What do you think would have been scarier? A reptile with 2 baboon heads or the petal-headed demon from the show? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching The Things. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to be the first to see our latest videos. See you later.